Hey, you're with the Waffle Press podcast. My name's Diego Crespo, and with me today I have a good companion from audienceseverywhere.net. Ryan, how's it going today?
It's going good today. How are you doing?
Uh, Pretty swell. Nursing a little bit of a hangover, but I'm very excited for our topic today. So, what I'm doing through the rest of the month of May is I'm asking friends and associates to come on and talk about their favorite blockbusters, directors, or blockbuster franchises. And Ryan, you chose the Wachowskis, which is a pretty unorthodox pick for people who are sort of movie lovers, but not really like they don't engage in the super long discussions that we would. And that's not a bad thing. They have lives. We don't. That's why we do this. Um, why did you pick the Wachowskis?
I kind of think that the Wachowskis, they're the most underrated film directors of our time. They're so underappreciated. They've made so many good movies. They made a couple not so good ones, but even when they fail, it's always an interesting failure. Like Matrix Revolutions, it's not a great conclusion to the series. I think there's a lot of good in there though. Most recently, even like Jupiter Ascending, it's a complete disaster on almost every level, but there's just something about it that I love so much, and they've made pretty much my favorite movie of the last decade, which would be Cloud Atlas. I've had a bit of an unhealthy obsession with it since it was first released. Otherwise, they have a really distinct visual style, I think. No one has made movies that look quite like theirs. Uh, but
Yeah, that's a good point. They're very distinct. We're gonna run down through the whole filmography as we go through this, but one of the ones that's actually my favorite of their work is Speed Racer, and some people are still just like blown away by that because, like, yeah, The Matrix is revolutionary. Cloud Atlas is the big ideas movie, but that one I could pop in at any point in my life. I could be sad. I could be on my deathbed. I could be just happy, and it's a movie that will always make me like content. But it's just so they're directors that are willing to really just do whatever they want. Like there's a really funny little meme about them I saw on Tumblr one time. Don't go to Tumblr. Everyone, Tumblr sucks, by the way. But it was like, oh, this might be a bad idea if we put this in the script. And then Andy turns to Lana and he's like, what do we say about bad ideas? There are no bad ideas. And then has them high five. You know, like they just do whatever they want, and that's admirable.
I can totally picture them doing that as well. I mean, they completely defy any kind of filmmaking logic that like we would know by modern blockbusters. Just look at any of the major set pieces in Speed Racer, and you can see it's not like any other racing movie you've ever seen before. Like compared to like the Fast and Furious movies, which at least the first couple ones try to be grounded in some kind of reality. Speed Racer, it's a total cartoon, and it's undeniably not trying to be anything close to realistic. The Wachowskis don't care about that. They just want it to be fun, and they want to throw in any kind of risky, wacky ideas that they could think of, stuff that no one else would even think of putting in their movies. There's a lot of great moments in Speed Racer, particularly like where they go off, especially with his younger brother and the monkey. Like I can't imagine any other directors taking a movie like Speed Racer and then having a little subplot where a boy and a monkey go and try and steal candy off of a plane.
Yeah, they're some people go as far to like just say they're bad directors, but I don't think they're bad at all. I just think they want to do what they want to do, and then they end up having the chance to make what they want to make, and creatively speaking, in a world that's kind of getting a little heavy on the franchising business. It's cool to see that they still have their voices in the midst of all that nonsense. But let's just go start breaking down from the top. Have you ever? I'm sure you have, but I haven't seen their first movie, Bound.
Bound.
Yeah.
I actually haven't seen that one either.
Okay, well then,
Yeah,
that's fine. We'll talk about it another time or something, or we'll tweet about it when we eventually do. So, I guess the one everyone knows him by, The Matrix.
The Matrix.
How do you feel about that movie?
The first one is really solid. it's a sci-fi. People consider it a sci-fi classic, and like for good reason. It deals with a lot of weighty philosophical ideas. There's some insane action scenes and cinematography. Um, Personally, the performances are what sell it for me. This is the role Keanu Reeves was made for, because he doesn't have a whole lot of range. So putting him as like the stoic, like that's what he was made to do. He's so perfect as the role of Neo. And then you got Lawrence Fishburne as Morpheus, one of the most iconic characters in sci-fi history, I think. Carrie Ann Moss, she's criminally underappreciated as Trinity, and I can't
Oh, yeah,
believe
totally.
her career didn't take off more after this movie because she's so good in it. She can carry herself in the action scenes better than many men I've seen in action movies today. Um, Otherwise, interestingly, it's one of the Matrix trilogy as a whole. It's their only like dark and gritty movie that I remember the Wachowskis doing. Um, Everything else, it's like kind of bright, colorful. Even Cloud Atlas, it's not like dour looking, but they kind of sell the look of it here because they turn it into something that we haven't seen before. And it's kind of Terminator-y at points, especially with the dystopian future kind of deal. But I think what they do with it works really well.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's there's a reason why people started using bullet time and slow mo. Like even to this day, the Resident Evil franchise, for some reason, still doing it. It stopped being cool like a decade ago, but they're still going. Yeah,
I
I
mean,
mean,
if nothing else, the movie was really influential then on its genre.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why people pinpoint that as like the quintessential Wachowski's movie because I know a lot of people don't really like their other movies besides that one. Um,
Weirdly,
Yeah, because I mean that The Matrix is just as weird as everything else, but it just I think there's something more tangible about it because of like you mentioned the Terminator style aesthetic with the little. It looks more real than something like a car crash in Speed Racer where someone gets a bubble formed around them for safety. You know.
well, I mean,
Uh,
the Matrix is really far out by itself, and you're exactly right. It's the aesthetic that people latch onto. Like, put someone down in front of Speed Racer without like even explaining it to them, and they'll have no idea what the hell they're looking at. But if you like give them the Matrix, I mean, chances are they're going to know exactly what they're looking at because it kind of feels familiar, but at the same time, it's so different with what they do.
Yeah, and I want to go on that Keanu Reeves point because obviously Keanu Reeves is the best actor of our time. John Wick is almost an action masterpiece, if not for the last 20 minutes. But no, you're right. The guy's got limited range, but so does someone like Tom Cruise. I think if you could just find them in these nice little roles like this, like Wachowski's found for Keanu Reeves, you could you could use him well. And yeah, he's nice little stoic badass Keanu Reeves, and that guy can sell a fight scene like nobody's business. I really love the character of Morpheus. I always have. Like when I saw the movie when I was younger, I was just like I want to be him when I grow up. I still kind of do. So I'm very happy that I get to see Lawrence Fishburne on like Hannibal and stuff still, and he's around.
Yeah,
I would say probably my favorite thing about The Matrix, and then I'll spin that question off to you. What your favorite part of it is? I think the cinematography. I've always been like a sucker for a good looking movie. Like if a movie isn't shot well, that will always deter me, or almost always deter me from loving it entirely. I need it to look like a movie, or at least know what it wants to look like, instead of just blandish nastiness. Or on another Terminator point, how Terminator 3 just it's lit like a sitcom. You know, it doesn't look like a movie. It just looks like a comedy that happens to have a Terminator in it. Here, these are like movies that look cool with cool visuals and big brashy ideas. And God, I love the first Matrix. So just think about it now. I want to watch it again.
well, it's interesting. I was watching it again last night, and I completely agree about the cinematography. I also think the special effects for 1999, it's some pretty good CG work in there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the thing that kind of surprised me is I hadn't seen any of the Matrix movies in a while. The action scenes, while they're pretty impressive, they kind of start to drag near the end. It does go on a bit too long, I think, and all three of the movies are pushing 2.5 hours, which it's a little bit of a brutal runtime when like about half of the movies are these action scenes. Especially in the later installments, they can get a little tiring. But Keanu Reeves, he's one of the best parts of the movie. Lawrence Fishburne, obviously, I already went off on Carrie Ann Moss, but I think Hugo Weaving as Smith, he's one of the most iconic villains in sci-fi history. I think he's Weaving's he's a pretty versatile actor. I was like, we'll see more of him like in Cloud Atlas, where he can pull so many different roles off easily. But here, I think he's really menacing. Not so much in the sequels, but he really pulls it off in the first one.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I didn't forget about it. Just like, huh? Yeah, I didn't get to bring Agent Smith up. Yeah, he's a great movie villain. And yeah, the sequels really he doesn't have that menace anymore. He doesn't have that haunting villainy. Yeah, I guess.
Funny.
Yeah, villain. And then he just I mean, something about the sequels is so odd to me because they just turn into more cartoony, but not in the way the Wachowskis usually handle cartoony elements. It's more cynical because they feel obligatory instead of changing the game. Like if they hadn't done The Matrix yet and they had done all their other movies that I've seen, and then they did The Matrix now and they started doing sequels or they announced they were going to do sequels, I'd be like, oh my god, the Wachowskis are going to change the game for sequels now. But they didn't. They're just kind of, while I think they both have their positives, they're not anywhere near as good as the first. And yeah, they don't have anything beyond maybe some good action set pieces for me. So I guess that's my segue into the Matrix sequels. What do you think about those? Because I just want to tackle them as a duo.
Well, I was going to say, like Matrix Reloaded, I think the action scenes are a huge improvement over the first one because at the very least there's a bit more variety in them.
I can see that. Yeah.
Again, they go on too long, but it doesn't so much bother me in Reloaded. Revolutions is where I start to get sick of it. And I agree, they do start to get more cartoony, but not in like a fun way. In a way like I feel like a lot of it was studio meddling. I don't know for sure, but they feel like very cookie cutter sequels compared to the first one. They don't deal with the same weighty philosophical ideas. The plot itself, it's a little more generic. It's a lot more just the Terminator again. Revolutions, I think it kind of goes off the rails at the end, though.
Oh my god, yeah.
It's kind of a disaster. Like at least the last half hour of that movie, if the rest of it is watchable. But Reloaded, I do think it's solid. I can have fun with it. Last night when I was rewatching them, and Revolutions was putting me to sleep through most of it. It's such a big anticlimax, being built up by like even if it goes on too long in the other movies, that set pieces are still really great and really memorable. Revolutions doesn't really have any of that.
Yeah, they have giant mech suits that shoot a lot of stuff, and I mean that's kind of about as creative as it gets. I mean, yeah, there's nothing really great. Like there's hundreds, if upon thousands, of Agent Smith clones. But
again, removing
so
all the menace he had, like what's the point?
Yeah, like maybe in theory that could have worked. Just like if they were all as powerful as he was in the first film, here they're just CGI empty shells for real. Like, yeah, there's no weight to it.
It's interesting
And
though because for Reloaded and Revolutions, they were released only 6 months apart. So I'm wondering how rushed the production might have been on Revolutions to make it end up like that. Because I can't really think of any memorable set pieces in Revolutions the way I can for Reloaded or the first one. Like Reloaded, that chateau fight is so good, and then there's the fight scene on the highway. Both great scenes.
That's the highlight for me.
But Revolutions, I can't really think of anything that makes me want to go back to it. I mean, outside of obligation for finishing the story.
Yeah, and even then, like you mentioned, it's not satisfying. You know, like even sometimes some trilogies don't end well, I can at least feel like, oh, I got some closure out of that. Like, my big thing is I don't think Spider-Man 3 is as bad as everyone says it is, and I actually kind of like the not the final little bit, not so much, but the death of like Harry Osborn and the friends closing up their little tragic friendship arc, whatever. Like it works for me for some reason.
If we
Here,
get
I
in,
got
if we
nothing.
get into Spider-Man 3, I'm just gonna go off on Amazing Spider-Man, and
Oh my god!
I don't
Yeah.
want to do that. But
Oh
I agree with you about Revolutions. There's no real closure.
yeah, and it's a shame because the first one still really holds up as an action movie, a sci-fi movie, as one of the more idea-driven blockbusters. And I mean, that's why I love the Wachowskis as much as I do. Like maybe they don't always have the best execution, and they're definitely not trying to please everyone. They're trying to please themselves, but that's what keeps me going with them. Yeah, I mean, they next up they did some second unit work on V for Vendetta, but do we really want to talk about that? I mean, I'd like to hear your
Oh,
thoughts on V for Vendetta if you.
I like V for Vendetta a lot. It's one of the better, I think, adaptations I've seen put to film, even though it's so much different from the story it's based on. But I think it's an enjoyable little action movie. And Natalie Portman always great, except in Star Wars. But
We don't
Hugo
talk about
Weaving,
that.
we don't talk about that. Hugo Weaving, he's pretty solid in it. Um, Otherwise, I haven't actually seen it in a while, so I don't remember. I remember there's a pretty good scene with some fireworks.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's that. Yeah, I mean, I like V for Vendetta. I've never been that high on it. Like some people will say it's like the best comic book movie, and I think that's
No.
that's insane, insanity. Just you're all crazy. But just do you. Well, their next big official directing gig was Speed Racer, my favorite movie ever of all time, and
Oh.
not really, but it's damn. This movie is just pure joy. But before I start rambling on, what are your thoughts on Speed Racer?
Speed Racer. For me, it's the best possible adaptation of the show I think anyone could have done. And it's kind of interesting because it had been in production for so long before the Wachowskis finally got attached to it. And I'm trying to imagine what kind of movie someone else would have made. But everything from this movie, it feels so. It's like a signature of the Wachowskis. It's so weird. It's bizarre. It's weirdly audacious in its own way. Um, Again, like I said earlier, those racing scenes are spectacular, especially the mid racing one where they're in that rally,
Mm-hmm.
um, like the street race part, and John Goodman's a national treasure, and
Oh yeah.
the fact that he hasn't won an Oscar yet bewilders me. Um, I like Emile Hirsch in it. He's pretty solid as the lead. Speed Racer, I think he's actually the least interesting part of his own movie, which might be the biggest problem I have with it. That and the pancakes are love line, which
You not a fan of that line?
no. Well, I mean, I've always been a waffle guy,
There we
obviously.
go. That's right.
Yeah,
Waffle press.
but
Hashtag.
uh, Trixie is one of the best characters I think in the entire movie. I think she's so cool, and it was Christina Ricci playing her. I
Yeah, that's
think.
her.
Yeah,
Cool
Christina
beans.
Ricci. Yeah. She had that great moment through the mid film where she takes over as one of the racers, and I kind of forgotten that happens. I was a little worried going into it that she would be like just the girl stuck on the sidelines the whole time, but I like that she gets in on the action a bit. Um, Otherwise, it's one of the most beautiful movies I think I've ever seen, which is weird because it looks like there's a lot of obvious green screen and it's a lot of CGI, but trying to shove this into any other movie, I think it would have looked bad. But for the overall aesthetic that the Wachowskis were going for, I think it works masterfully. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I mean the special effects are just so noticeable, but they're not really trying to hide any of it. Like I think some people see this compared to like uh, lots of other traditional blockbusters that just happen to have crappy CGI. Here, I think it's exactly what the movie needs it to be. Like some criticism might be like a one size fits all type thing. Like, oh, well, this CGI doesn't work here, so why should it work here? Well, This is a different movie from traditional blockbuster number 37. You know, like it's just so fucking weird, and it's. I wish more blockbusters were like this. I mean, the only other like car movies that I've enjoyed more are maybe the Fast and Furious movies, like a couple of them, maybe. But
I mean,
even then, that's like really pushing it. I mean,
if we get on the Fast and Furious movies, I think they're so spectacularly different that it's almost not a fair comparison. Though
you got a point there, yeah.
Speed Racer is better than like half of that series.
Oh
If you're just
yeah,
going objectively, better than 1 to 4 at least.
Tokyo Drift, maybe Tokyo Drift, but not a light better. I don't know. Tokyo Drift is kind of a masterpiece. Anyways, I won't get on that because I know we have differing opinions on Tokyo Drift. But Speed Racer is it's a living, breathing cartoon that happens to have a shitload of genres smashed into it. It's an action movie. It's a family adventure. It's a goofy Disney Channel type thing once in a while, like with the kid and the monkey. Like
the Kid and the Monkey are so great.
Yeah, there's one of my favorite things about the movie. Like, all these different mechanisms in this story, I can't even explain why they work for me, to be honest. Like, I really need to sit down more and actually deconstruct the movie for myself to properly explain it. Because when I first saw it, I wasn't a fan. I think that was a lot to do with the time and how, like, my age. I was just younger and dumb. And The Dark Knight was like the in thing, you know, so like the darker, realistic thing. And this is the exact opposite of that. So I think it's a movie that is a great movie that came out at the worst possible time for itself. Like if that came out around now when people start getting more open about the like comic book stuff, where it's like, yeah, Age of Ultron ends with like a big fight in the sky with the flying city, like people have no problem buying into that. So maybe if like they re-release Speed Racer in like 30 years, it'll be like, ah, yes, this is 2001: A Space Odyssey, but for cartoons, you know?
It came out mid 2000s, 2008, I think.
Yeah,
And
2008.
At the time, everyone was so hung up on the dark, gritty look that along comes Speed Racer, and people have no idea what to make of it. So I think you're exactly right. It came out at the wrong time. When it comes to the different genres, I think that's kind of the Wachowski specialty. They're so good at juggling so many different genres. Like, again, you'll get to that with Cloud Atlas, which is another masterpiece. But Speed Racer, I think it's a lot. It takes itself seriously, but not in a way that makes it depressing or like hard to watch. It's lighthearted enough, and it like you could show it to your kids, and if they're smart enough, they'll enjoy it. Most people, I think, nowadays show it to anyone. They could probably find something to like in it, unless you're like Batman v Superman crowd who hate fun.
But it's so dark and gritty and realistic. How could you not be excited for that?
Oh well, I mean, I want to see Superman bleed. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Why does no one bleed in Speed Racer? Come on.
Yeah, it's not dark enough. There's too much color. It looks too fun. I hate it. I hate it already. But no, I actually the idea popped in my head. I would be so happy if the Wachowskis directed a Power Rangers movie because I have no attachment to that franchise whatsoever. I never really grew up with it. I just never cared. But if they could somehow convince a studio to give them another truckload of cash to make a movie like this for Power Rangers, I would be very happy now because this is like, I mean, those shows you watch when we're all young and whatever, they're very specifically ones in the '90s are just fucking weird, and especially the ones around like Speed Racer time, like in the '60s or whenever that was initially coming out, the cartoon. And yeah, you're right. They perfectly adapted it. It's one of the best adaptations of a source material ever, I think, because it's so true to that goofiness, but it's also a good movie in its own right. Like it's a well told story. Everything's executed in proper fashion for this type of story, and it's just I'm constantly amazed when I watch this movie.
And I agree, especially with the Power Rangers. The Wachowski should get on that, but it starts me thinking about other old cartoons and How perfect would it have been if the Wachowskis had been able to direct the new TMNT movie?
That
Like,
would have been incredible.
instead of, I don't even want to talk about that, but the Wachowski Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, they need to get on that.
Yeah, I mean, I am a new fan to that because I didn't really grow up with that either. And then last year, I sat down for like 48 hours. And in the span of 48 hours, I saw all five of the movies, and I didn't really like a lot of them. There's like one or two that I quite enjoyed, but
I really love the first two movies, especially the first one. I love the puppetry for the costumes and stuff. It looks to this day it looks better than the awful CGI garbage they had in the new one from last year.
they're Teenage Mutant Shreks. That's it. That's what they look like.
And they have like weird lips on their faces.
Yeah,
Ugh,
it's odd. Like
it's really
uh,
disturbing.
they
But
look like H.R. Giger like designs,
you
like
know,
how
if you,
the alien was supposed to have like lips in Alien 3 or some shit.
if he had designed the new Ninja Turtles, I would have loved that actually. Like if you're gonna make them look scary, go all out on it. Don't just half-ass it. And
Yeah, like just turn it into a full-fledged horror movie. Like as soon as the trailer starts for the new TMNT, just have it like positioned as an action movie, and then halfway through, just show the turtles like massacring entire hallways full of college kids, and then there's your twist on the dark and gritty thing. Boom, we figured it out. You don't even need the Wachowski. Just get a good horror director.
God,
Yeah.
it's
But
pretty
before
good.
we get too off the rails in this show, yeah, Speed Racer is a masterpiece, and anybody who says otherwise doesn't know what they're talking about. I mean, I'm open to everyone's personal opinion, but in this case, you'd be wrong. Like that's just a
It's a
fact of
fact.
life.
It's a fact. Yeah.
Yeah. Next up is, I believe, your favorite of their work. I don't want to presume
Uh,
here, but
you'd be right.
yeah,
It's
Cloud Atlas. What are your thoughts on Cloud Atlas?
Cloud Atlas is a masterpiece in every way imaginable. I think it gets everything right. Um, like I said before, I've had this weird obsession with it ever since I saw it in theaters, and I bought the Blu-ray and I've watched it like 117,000 times since I got it. And it's when people ask, like I point to Cloud Atlas as one of my favorite movies of the last decade, and I get the weird looks because I think people don't get it. I think like not to sound like a pretentious douchebag, but it's one of
No,
those
no, no.
movies I think people
It's true.
don't get yet, and I think in like maybe like 20, 30 years, people will revisit Cloud Atlas and they'll recognize it for the masterpiece it is. It's it's the most audacious movie I've seen in years, maybe ever. It's so unlike anything I've ever seen. Visually, I mean, they got the Wachowskis, and they also got who did they get for this?
Oh, there's a Tom Tykwer.
Tom Tykwer, yeah. So they got
Yeah.
him, and it's kind of impressive how they kind of split up the different segments of the film, and they managed to make them feel like a cohesive whole. It has the best editing I've ever seen in a movie. Robbed for the Oscar that year. That was bullshit. Because I don't know, like in anyone else's hands, this might have seemed like a mess, but somehow all these six different stories intercut among one another. They feel like a cohesive whole, which was a little surprising to me because I'd read the book and I wasn't really sure how they would translate it well into film. Because the book, it's structured really deliberately. They got like half of the first story, half the second story. They got half the third story, half the fourth, half the fifth, and all of the sixth. Like just going from like the 1800s story up to the post-apocalyptic one. And once the whole sixth one is done, they start counting backwards to do the second half, which
Oh, that's
is
weird.
it sounds weird, but it works really well for a book. But
Mhm.
for a movie, that might not have worked as well. Especially considering there's so many callbacks to different stories. There's so many ways they're interconnected. So I think editing them together into like a huge mosaic of a movie was a brilliant choice, and I don't know who else would have thought of that besides the Wachowskis.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's a perfect movie, but maybe I need to give it more time. I do think it's an incredible feat of a movie. I think it deserves to be recognized for the brilliance that it is. And one of my favorite things about the movie is the editing, and I'm very glad you brought that up because yeah, this movie could be a total fucking mess. In traditional big budget movie standards, this movie doesn't work. It just wouldn't. But here, you have some of the most creative minds in the business, and just holy shit. The way I've always felt about it was always positive, but as time goes on, I've come to realize, like, wow, I love this movie. Like, I have a deep, resonating love for this movie. Not as much as Speed Racer, but it's getting there. Cloud Atlas, I think, another one of the great things about it is how it does transition from all the different intersecting stories through emotion. I feel like, or thematically, instead of traditional just here's a scene that's going to lead into act two, like a lot of movies do. I mean, it's not a huge issue I have with a lot of movies or anything like that. It's just it's so inventive, and I can't believe I never even got on board to complain about the Oscars not giving it best editing, because that is bullshit.
Total bullshit. And it's really well structured. Like you said, there's like multiple scenes of acts of kindness, multiple scenes of romance. There's like there might be like a dramatic chase scene intercut with a comedic chase scene, and it all flows so well. It doesn't feel disjointed at all, which it's really impressive considering, like, again, it's like the Wachowskis working. I think they had like the latter three halves, and then we gave Tom Tykwer the first three halves. And I don't know who the editor was on this, but God,
it was Alexander Berner.
Robbed for that Oscar, man. He deserved that. Another thing, a lot of people really complained about the makeup work, especially there's a lot of controversy about the yellow face that was going on
right.
in the Neo Soul sections, which I do really get, but not to defend Yellowface, but I think thematically it works because you have to follow the progression of these souls throughout the time period. It's like 500-year story arc, and it's really important to see who goes where and why and what happens to them. And while the makeup, I do think sometimes it looks a little silly. I think it's important that it always draws attention to that you're looking at the same actor. Except there's a couple instances where they are completely transformed. And one of my favorite parts of watching this in the theater was during the credits when it showed pictures of who everyone played. And both times I saw it in theaters, it was a packed audience, and there were multiple gasps for each person. Especially, I think, Halle Berry playing old doctor in Soul, which was one of the more impressive ones. Hugo Weaving is great as like almost a Nurse Ratched-esque character, and in his story, in that storyline, there's a lot of intercut pieces, and I think they all come together as a whole nicely. If there's one flaw I have with the movie, it's in Halle Berry's storyline in like the '70s. Her and Keith David come up with this plan to catch Hugo Weaving, and it's like the worst plan I could ever possibly imagine. And I have no idea what they were thinking, but that's a pretty minor issue because it still ends up being a pretty good scene. Like, there are flaws to the movie, but I think for what it sets out to do, it manages to be perfect. All you can really judge a movie is based on what it wants to be, and Cloud Atlas is so good at being what it wants to be. It's so different. I'm going to use the word audacious a lot because that's what it is. I was blown away when I saw it in the theater.
Yeah, it's audacious is totally the right word for the Wachowski movies. I mean, again, Speed Racer is still my numero uno, but Cloud Atlas is, I think, more quintessential Wachowski because the traditional movie structure stuff just doesn't really matter. But their ideas are what carry through all their movies for the most part. This is the quintessential idea movie for them, like, and it's so Wachowski to me that it's why it keeps growing on me. I think, yeah, that's Cloud Atlas, great. And then we got one more little movie.
Oh man,
people do not like this movie a lot, and I get I get that. I really do. But I can't help but really like it and be mindlessly entertained. So, what are your thoughts on Jupiter Ascending? Let's just get right into it.
Jupiter Ascending, it's a complete disaster in pretty much every way. Um, Aside from the rather impressive visual design, nothing in the film works. The editing is off. It's weirdly structured. It's got some of the most unintentionally hilarious dialogue I've seen in any modern movie. I think Mila Kunis, she's a great actress, but she's woefully miscast in this. Channing Tatum, most of the time through the movie, he looks like he's just tolerating her. Uh, I think the worst part of Jupiter Ascending is the action sequences, which, on top of going on way too long, they have no real purpose in the actual narrative. And it's like filmmaking 101. If you have an action scene that has to further the plot in some way or like help do something to develop the characters, like at least have some kind of stakes. But you could take any of the action scenes in Jupiter Ascending, except maybe the big climactic one, cut them out, and I don't think the story would be changed at all. Especially there's the first big action scene comes when Kane is taking Jupiter up to this ship. Like they step out of the skyscraper, and I mean, what would really be changed if you had taken out that action scene and just had it that the ship couldn't come through because of that blockade that was put up around the Earth? Like instead, you get like this. It feels like an hour of them just endlessly flying around. I think it was Chicago, the city they're in.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes on forever. And the other action scenes are like that a lot as well, especially the one at the wedding, which, on top of like being a ripoff of Ender's Game, the big climax there, it's so boring. Otherwise, I think Sean Bean is in it as well.
Yeah, no, I like Sean Bean a lot. I think he's fine in the movie.
I like Sean Bean a lot as well, and he's good in the movie. It's his character that kind of bewilders me. I'm a little confused as to who would make a half man, half bee. But then there's also a half man, half elephant later in the movie. So, and then there's like this plot point about how the bees can smell royalty, and it's so ridiculous. And when I think about it, all I can do is laugh because it's so stupid, and I can't imagine how this movie got made and what the Wachowskis were thinking. But at the same time, I have so much fun watching this whole thing because it's their typical weirdness, but at the same time, it's so earnest and it's so sincere in everything it's trying to do that even if nothing in the movie works, it's kind of fun to watch. And I mean, I get where they were. I kind of get where they were coming from when they were making it. They wanted to make like this grand space opera. From what I've heard, there was some behind-the-scenes stuff where there was a better cut of the movie, and this was like when it got pushed back from July to February because it was supposed to come out last year.
Yeah,
I believe
it got pushed back twice.
Did it? I just know.
So.
I just know the studio wasn't happy with the final cut that they had, and so I feel like a lot of it is with the editing, which is so weird, coming off Cloud Atlas, which is a perfectly edited movie, to this, which none of the editing is it's maybe the worst I've seen all year. I mean, Black Hat was pretty bad, but
I'm gonna fight later. But yeah, I disagree with that. I am a newly crowned Black Hat fan, so I have to be on the guard.
What do you think of Jupiter Ascending?
I think Jupiter Ascending is so fucking weird and pretty terrible, but it's my type of terrible movie. Like, I have specific types of bad movies that I like. Just the fact that some of them exist, like that gets me to enjoy them. And I think when you can tell when a director puts their heart and soul into a movie, and the Wachowskis do that all the time, or more or less. I'm gonna still go back to the Matrix sequels as the ones that don't feel.
They're a little lazy.
Yeah, like I mean, if it was a studio thing, then I get it. Then maybe they just don't want to be there. But Jupiter Ascending is still Wachowski. It's got them all over it. Only they could have made this weird ass movie with Sean Bean playing a character named Stinger, who's half B, half B. and then you got Channing Tatum, who's like, is he like half wolf or half dog? Hang on, half.
He's like a lone like half albino wolf man.
Yeah, half human and half canine. It's like it's just so weird. Like this is just it's a living, breathing anime, and as we all know,
It,
all anime is bad.
this is
But
better. This is better than anime.
oh yeah, no, this is better than anime.
Yeah.
Yeah, obviously.
Well, I mean, the thing
But
is,
you can
it's
see the influences.
yeah, it is a bad movie. Like, there's no denying that. But I think the difference between why I enjoy this and then other types of bad movies, like I was talking to someone on Twitter the other day about Jupiter Ascending, and I said it's maybe my favorite bad movie of all time. And they told me Sharknado was theirs, and I'm like, there's the main difference between those is Sharknado is trying to be bad. The Wachowskis poured their heart and soul into Jupiter Ascending, and the fact that it's a disaster is completely irrelevant because they tried so hard, and you can see that on screen. I can't help but appreciate the hard work they put into this. Like, I don't like Sharknado because it doesn't try. It wants us to make fun of it, and I don't want something that knows it's bad. I want something that thinks it's good.
Yeah, and Sharknado feels a little cynical too for me. You know, like because yeah, they tried to make Sharknado movies to be as bad as possible, and if everyone behind the scenes having a good time, I can respect that. But I don't get much enjoyment out of the Sharknado movies because they're just like they do
Actually,
nothing. Jupiter
actually,
Ascending.
yeah. No.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I actually haven't seen the second Sharknado movie, so I don't know how it holds up to the first one. Which it was pretty terrible, but Jupiter Ascending is something. It's the kind of bad movie I can get behind. Something that's more fun.
Yeah, and I guess like I'm gonna use sitcom tropes or no, I'm not gonna use sitcom. Like the first Rocky Balboa loses the fight, but he wins in the long run because he proved to himself and everyone else that he could do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel the same way about Jupiter Ascending. Jupiter Ascending is the movie version of the Rocky Balboa character, except they lost even more so. Like instead of just being beaten and battered and losing the fight, like they broke their spine and their legs and their lungs are hanging out of their throat, but they proved that they could do it. So I admire that very much.
Actually, in Jupiter Ascending, speaking of sitcom tropes, I kind of like her stereotypically Russian family. I think
That's amazing.
They're a little fun to watch. I don't really get why she's so devoted to them towards the end, where she's like willing to risk everything. Because I don't really see any personality out of them outside of being stereotypical Russian family. But they're entertaining to watch. They actually get some genuine laughs out of me. All the other laughs in the movie, I think, are pretty unintentional. There's that really bizarre sequence that's like trying to make fun of like bureaucracy that feels so out of place compared to the rest of the movie, and it's not funny, and it's not all that entertaining to watch. And so I'm a little confused as to why, if something had to be cut out, why this was left in. Um, yeah, it's a really weird scene.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard people compare this to Phantom Menace, and I get that because I think this movie has a lot of the same problems, but these people, Wachowskis, they care about their movie so much. And not to say George Lucas didn't care. I mean, the guy, if anything, is a really decent human being. You know, like he always seems like the most humble guy. His ideas aren't as entertaining and they're not as endearing. Something like Jar Jar Binks in the hands of the Wachowskis would be the greatest thing in the world, I think.
Well,
I don't think
Jupiter Ascending kind of has its own Jar Jar Binks in a way. I mean, um, Eddie Redmayne, in the wrong hands, he could be a Jar Jar Binks level disaster. But I mean, I think he's the only one who knows how bad the movie is, and his performance is almost campy enough to make it kind of legendary. Like one or two more huge outbursts, and I think it could have been in the history books for that. But he's really funny to watch, and it makes me kind of appreciate Eddie Redmayne even more. He spends so much of the movie whispering that I could hear. You can hear it fine in the theater, but when I brought it home, I had to turn on the subtitles because, like, especially that scene where where him and his two siblings are meeting on that harvested planet. I can't hear a word that he's saying unless I turn it up so loud, because I don't know if he was directed to do that, but
Yeah, like
I think whoever told him to that's how he should play his character.
yeah, I want to know if that was his decision or the Wachowskis or producer, whoever. I want to know who did that, who caused that to happen, so I can buy them like a beer or something. Because that's probably my favorite part of the movie.
Eddie
Is that's
Redmayne.
just yeah, I'm not even kidding. Because it's just such a bad performance. To me, it's almost like a Nicolas Cage type of bad,
Well,
but not the
he has
same
the weird
level.
random outbursts though, so I do get the Nicolas Cage comparison.
Hmm.
Um, Otherwise, he's the worst, but he's also the best one in the movie. Because I mean, I think Mila Kunis, she's trying to give a good performance, but her it's still really bad. So that kind of
Yeah,
makes me like it less. Uh, Otherwise, I think the movie it needed more of like stuff towards the end where I kind of started to get behind it a bit more, like legitimately, when they were on Jupiter and everything was blowing up. I like that Mila Kunis has her own action scene where she kind of has to survive by herself. And
hmm
for once, Kane isn't swooping in at the last minute to save her. They do that like 3 or 4 times throughout the movie.
yeah. Like that's one of the things that I was surprised the Wachowskis did. Because oh, you were talking about how Trixie did her own thing. Like at first, I was like, oh, kind of she's going to just be a love interest and that whatever, fine. But then she gets her own race and stuff. She becomes more important to the story than just love interest. And then Jupiter gets nothing really. I mean, she's important to the story, but only because we're
Only
told she is.
only because she's the chosen one.
Yeah, and that to me, the chosen one, because destiny bullshit. It's the fucking worst.
And
And this one doesn't get it right either,
no,
but it's really fun.
it's pretty bad, all the chosen one bullshit. And I kept waiting for the Wachowskis to kind of flip the script and have Jupiter save Kane, but it never happens, which is again weird for them because they have so many great female characters. The fact that Jupiter feels so aggressive kind of bothers me, and it makes me like the movie even less. But at the same time, like nothing else in the movie is good, so all you can do is laugh at these scenes, especially towards the end of the movie, the last time when she's falling, the way Mila Kunis flails her arms and legs around while she's in midair is fucking hilarious. Oh my god! But actually, I do think I'm going to correct myself. There is one good aspect, and it's the art design. The visual design of everything is really weird, really bizarre, but it's really cool as well. And you can see the influence from other properties, like you said, anime. There's obviously influence from other sci-fi elements as well, but
Terry Gilliam.
a lot of Terry Gilliam.
Mhm.
But I think it all looks so great. But the problem is that it's all background decoration. All this weird, cool-looking stuff doesn't really have a physical impact on the characters or on the story. It's just kind of there. And I think Jupiter's way too quick to accept the Queen of the Universe thing. She doesn't ask any questions. She's like, in the car, she's like, "What's going on?" And she doesn't really ask anything else aside from, like, "What do you mean our planet was seeded by other humans?" And that's another thing. A lot of scenes, if it's not an action scene, it's usually someone standing around explaining the plot to Mila Kunis because she's supposed to be our everyman character, which it doesn't work here because she's not really a character. She's kind of a like she's like a walking cardboard cutout basically. She doesn't do anything interesting until the end of the movie, where she finally starts to take some initiative. But even then, it's too little, too late.
Yeah, I think if they had maybe tighter editing or tighter script, then maybe that turn at the end where she has to do her own thing finally would have made more of an impact. Like maybe if she had saved Kane more or like at all,
Yeah,
that would have been great. You know, just like halfway through the movie, like you get to do a beat where Kane saves her, and then the next one looks like he's going to save her, and then she needs to save him. Like that would have been cool. But I mean, there's so much wrong with this movie.
hmm
I think this is the one I could talk about the most, just because, like, where do you even
It's so
where does this
fascinating.
go? Yeah, I mean, it's a movie worth talking about. At least it's not unlike some other blockbusters that are just like,
Yeah,
destruction,
and I mean
shooting stuff.
it's maybe one of the worst movies I've seen this year, but it's the one I think about the most afterwards. And I was so happy on, I think it was Wednesday or Thursday, when I found out that Jupiter Ascending was released on digital a month early. And I kind of had the movie on repeat for like a whole day, just trying to figure out what the hell was going on. Um, yeah, it's it's by the end of the year, I think it's going to make my best and worst list.
Huh.
Yeah,
I can see that, because I mean, you mentioned on Twitter before that you think it's simultaneously the best and worst movie of the year so far.
I do. I stand
Yeah.
by that. But I mean, I think obviously there's movies that were better, but I can think of few movies that I enjoy watching more than this one from this year. Doesn't make it good at all, but I think it's a lot of fun, and I think some people discount it too much. They see it as simply a bad movie, but I kind of think it's more than that.
Well, I do too, because I used to be like, oh, this is a good movie. This is what makes a movie good. This is what makes a movie bad. I feel more well learned, I guess you could say. Like, there's so much more that just makes a movie with it. Yeah, just good or bad. There's all these things in between, outside, all over the place. Like, how many Oscar winning movies have actually been good? You know, when you really start to think about it. And Jupiter Ascending, I undoubtedly bad, maybe even awful,
Give
but
give
I can't
give
help
it
but love it.
give it an Oscar for like its visual design. At least it deserves that. Like
Oh yeah, definitely.
best effects, the CG is great. Um, I think somewhere there's like a 2.5 hour, 3 hour cut of this movie floating around that's way better and way more cohesive. And I think I'd really like to see that. But I feel like it's probably never going to happen. It's the same way I really want to see that 3.5 hour cut of Age of Ultron. But I don't know if we're ever going to get that.
Yeah, no, I think maybe for Jupiter Ascending down the line, maybe if it gets like a big cult fan base or something, maybe like 15, 20 years.
I'm
But
not.
Age of Ultron, I don't think we're going to see, because Marvel and their secret vaults of footage and Edgar Wright Ant-Man scripts, it's like that stuff's never coming out. As much as I like Age of Ultron, I would have liked to have seen that full cut too.
Jupiter Ascending, it already has a huge cult following. I mean, Tumblr's the devil, but if you go on Tumblr, like people are obsessed with this movie, and it's kind of the most Tumblr made movie ever. It's perfect for them.
Yeah, in a
Um,
way, yeah, I can see that.
it's like the Wachowskis were catering to Tumblr fans when they made Jupiter Ascending.
Yeah, like I bet they have Tumblers and they're just so happy that their movie caught on to the crowd. Like I can just imagine Lana and Andy just like wiping away tears, like we did it, we did it. You know, like, and good for them, good for them. I mean,
For
it
them,
must be nice to have even something as disastrous as this and see it beloved by any number of people.
mhm.
That must feel good. So good for them.
And you know what? Maybe those Jupiter Ascending fans feel kind of how I felt when Cloud Atlas first came out, and so many people hated it. Um, and I can't take that away from them. I mean, if they enjoy the movie, good for them. If they think it's good, that's fine. I did have the other day on Twitter, after I was tweeting a bit about it while I was watching it, and I woke up the next morning to find my mentions flooded by someone who's railing on me for hating Jupiter Ascending and going on and on about its genius. And they think it's like this Arturist masterpiece, and I'm like, good for you, but I'm gonna block you because I don't want to deal with this anymore. So I want to be able to tweet about Jupiter Ascending without being bombarded by this lunatic. But if you like Jupiter Ascending, good for you. I mean, I think there's a lot to like, and mixed in with the bad.
Yeah, I mean it's the quintessential what the fuck movie, because it's a hot discussion piece. Like if you want to like break ground with like a hardcore film fan, I honest to God recommend Jupiter Ascending to either talk about it, and if they haven't seen it, invite him to hang out and watch it because you will feel something at the end of the movie, whether it's good or bad. That's probably up to you, but it's worth watching and it's worth talking about.
I definitely agree, and this is probably it's probably going to be my most talked about movie of the year because I just keep going back to it. And like Age of Ultron, it's great. Furious 7 was great. Looking
Black
back,
Hat was great. Ex Machina was
no,
great.
I haven't seen Ex Machina yet. Actually,
At the
it
time of this recording, I just saw it like a day or two ago, and it watch it.
yeah,
Yeah, watch it.
it only just opened in Calgary yesterday,
Hmm.
so I'm thinking I'll probably go Tuesday or something. But um, all those movies are really great, but I'm not fascinated by them the way I am about Jupiter Ascending.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get on the Spider-Man thing before we wrap up, but that was my most talked about movie last year, or the one I was talking the most about, because I wanted to understand what went wrong, what could have made a movie this bad, and that was not a good bad movie. That's just a shit. That movie literally killed the franchise.
I can tell you what went wrong. It's the script.
I There's so much though, like
There
so
is.
much. I'm not gonna go into it, but like almost nothing in that movie works besides maybe Garfield's performance, and that's still he
Uh,
does good with what he's given. I mean,
I think
it's not a Mila Kunis situation where he's just miscast. I don't think.
I think
I
Emma
think a lot of it's
I think
work.
Emma Stone's a bit better than he is in that movie, but she's given nothing to do, and her scenes are kind of most insufferable. Especially, I almost walked out of the theater in the scene where they were discussing the new ground rules for their relationship. And then
Yeah,
her death scene, it was really hilarious.
I
Like
laughed out
genuine.
loud in my theater, and people were crying, and I was like, oh shit, you know.
Yeah, the guy I saw it with at the time, we were laughing our asses off in this theater, and everyone else was so quiet. They took it so seriously, and I have no idea why they're so invested in this movie.
Yeah.
But
I can get invested
uh,
in Jupiter Ascending now.
yes, I
Absolutely.
could.
And on that note, I will now ask you to reiterate one more time your favorite Wachowski's movie and favorite moment from any of their movies.
Well, Cloud Atlas, obviously my favorite. If I had to pick a favorite moment, uh, there's so many good ones. Mm, for Cloud Atlas, it's probably going to have to be there was the suicide scene. I think is really affecting to me, at least near the end of Cloud Atlas. That's also my favorite storyline, the 1920s one. I think that's a really powerful scene. One that I don't think it's really gotten the credit it's due yet of how emotionally affecting it is. That's
Yeah,
probably my favorite.
that's that's a that's a powerful scene. For me, it's Speed Racer. The ending
That's a
where
great ending.
Speed finally achieves his goals. It's a very simple type of story. Things like you know he's gonna win.
Mhm.
You just the movie invests me so much in a story like that that I cheer every time. Like I don't. Some people have said like they even cry at the end. I'm like, I don't know about that. I wasn't
Yeah,
that connected. Like, but it's one that really reiterates what I love about movies. Just like they can, I know what's going to happen a lot of the time. A movie doesn't need surprises to be good because sometimes you end up with like this dumb plot twist don't make any sense for story reasons or thematic reasons, like fucking
mhm.
Khan and Star Trek Into Darkness. But
Oh
a
yeah,
simple story can be just as effective as anything in Inception. You know, anything as
yeah.
construed as
Inception's
that.
also not very good,
I will fight you
but
on that, but that's another
yeah.
time again.
But
Yeah. So
if we're talking Speed Racer, my favorite scene is about halfway through the movie when there's that random ninja fight.
Nanjas,
Nanjas, right.
cool
That was
beans.
a great scene.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna watch it again right after this. All right, we're gonna wrap up right now. But Ryan, why don't you tell the people where they could find you on the internets?
You You can find me on audienceseverywhere.net, or you can find me on Twitter at Ryan2_McLean.
I thought it was McLean for the longest time, but McLean's cool because that's my
Yeah.
favorite action hero ever. All right, well, thank you so much for joining me, Ryan, because I don't know a lot of other people who like the Wachowskis as much as the handful of us on Twitter. So,
yeah, it's no problem. I had a lot of fun.
oh, thank you very much. Love to have you on again soon. Again, this has been the Waffle Press podcast. Tune in for all of May to see what other blockbusters and directors and franchises we talk about. I might just make this a regular thing beyond May because there's so much to talk about, and I don't like shutting up ever. But I will shut up right now. Thank you for joining me, everyone, and chat us on Twitter at the Waffle Press. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. I guess follow us on Tumblr, even though Tumblr is toxic. Like us on Facebook. Definitely check out audienceseverywhere.net. That's it for today. We have been professionally unprofessional.